I've been thinking recently, I've put out some videos in the past about ways to improve Bionicle Quest for the Toa, a title that's way too long. I'm just going to be calling it Quest for the Toa from now on. But this is a game that is very close to my heart, probably my personal favorite Bionicle franchise game, which is crazy in a world where like Imnog and things like that exist. I very much appreciate those point and click type games, and the art design behind them is unparalleled, honestly. But Quest for the Toa holds a very special place in my heart for a handful of reasons, one of which I didn't really pick up on first glance, but after having played it for a while, kind of makes sense because there's another big game from the early 2000s that I used to play nonstop. I used to sink hours and hours into, and that is Diablo 2. Probably, arguably, one of the most influential action role-playing games of all time. And it's worth noting, too, that although I don't see Bionicle Quest for the Toa described as an action role-playing game, it's pretty close, honestly. There are definitely a few things that sort of set it apart. I see people describe it as sort of like an action adventure game, which, yeah, I guess that makes sense too. There's no real like loot or skill system, but you do have some kind of interesting things that you feed off of this game. A world of progression should you choose to explore it, right? Bionicle Quest for the Toa. I said I was going to just call it Quest for the Toa. I swear I'm going to. All right, but the point is, when I think about the game and I think about the improvements I've wanted to make to the game in my own mind, a lot of those improvements have actually been inspired by Diablo 2 and its influence on me without me even really realizing it, because I never had compared the two games before. Even when I was looking into remaking the Quest for the Toa game, and I found another game online that was supposed to be like an engine to sort of build off of, and that game was very clearly inspired by Diablo as well. It still never dawned on me that these two games have some similarities. Now, there's a lot of complexity when it comes to the Diablo 2 game. There's so much nuance in there. There's channels, entire YouTube channels devoted to the complexity of the game and how all of the different pieces of equipment and skills and classes and etc. sort of interact with each other and how you could do some really fun stuff. Again, I highly encourage the game if you've never played it before. But with Bionicle, with Quest for the Toa, there's not so much of that nuance, but there could be, and I actually think the game could benefit from it. Now, you're playing as a Matoran, so I guess it wouldn't feel exactly right to have elemental powers, because that's not accurate for Matoran, at least most, if not all, from the storyline. But when I think about my own story, Mota, and the world that I've been building outside of that, that's separate from the Bar Magna expansion project, I should mention, but in my story, there is a special character, or group of characters rather, who actually get some MacGuffins, let's just say, that allow them some abilities from, like the Toa, some access to elemental powers. I feel, if Matanui, for example, has the ability to give elemental powers to the Glatorian or whatever the case may be, I'm not terribly caught up on all the details there, but it would be possible to do the same through other means. And in fact, when I was rewriting my story for 2004 and 2005, sort of condensing that story, even in that, I was thinking about how Toa could sort of supplement some of their own power and give it to somebody else, borrow it to somebody else. Anyway, getting ahead of myself here. So when I think about trying to turn a Quest for the Toa sequel, let's say, into more of an action role-playing game without being a direct rip of Diablo 2 or any other real thing, allowing it its own feet, its own room to breathe. I think there is something really interesting there, but I also think that you can do it while still honoring the essence of what Bionicle is. And, when I think about my story, again, going back to Mota, it's its own island, it's in the sort of classic world building, it's in 2003, and so all things considered, this is a new place filled with new characters, a new Rahi, and a new world, essentially, but still told through that sort of mysterious, nostalgic vehicle. What else can I call it? Anyway, getting ahead of myself. So what would I do to improve a game like Quest for the Toa to make it more fluid? Because, like I said, I could go almost so far as to call the original game an action role-playing game, but there are a couple very distinctive things that it is missing that sort of leave me not wanting to give it that full credit, right? And that is one, the ability to travel quickly between maps. Honestly, I think the biggest sort of folly on that game, and why I don't revisit it as often as I would otherwise, is that you are limited in your travel speed. There's no method in the game. Well, I guess technically once you get the launcher and in some cases get the lava board, you can kind of use those couple items to travel a little faster. But at the end of the day, you're still very limited on how fast you can move, and there's no way for you to quick travel, to fast travel from point A to point B. If you want to go from Onukoro at the very beginning to Takoro at the very end, you have to walk all the way there. And that's not fun, right? So I think adding the ability to fast travel, even if you don't get the ability until after you've beaten the game once, is actually fine. At the same time, you know, this is a game where you have health, you have energy, you have equipment, which I guess you could kind of call similar to spells. It's not exactly the same, obviously. And also, Bionicle is a world where elements exist and mask powers exist, so I could see even having characters with classes, for lack of a better term right now, right? Adding implements of those little bits of them, allowing your Matoran character that you build to be able to access the power in their mask, even if it's a diminished form of it, or access very mild forms of their elemental powers and get stronger as the game progresses, would be really interesting, right? The ability to store up health crystals and energy crystals, etc. As you can see, like when you start to add these things into it, some of these, as far as I've heard, were even meant to be in the original game. It starts to get a lot closer to that action role-playing game. And I really think it could benefit from that. I don't necessarily think it would be as mind-blowing as a game like Diablo 2, obviously. You know, it's a franchise that, while still alive in the minds of fans, is all but abandoned, at least right now, from Lego, right? And at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think it has quite as much love as these larger, maybe I'm wrong, but larger franchises, you know, from big names, especially names that are so focused already on making games and making content like that. You know, Blizzard owns Diablo 2. I think Activision owns, you get the point I'm making, right? So Bionicle is primarily a toy-focused theme with the occasional piece of entertainment wrapped around it. And I love that. So anyway, where does this go from here? I've already thought in the past, because I am somebody who's built a bajillion Rahi, how fun it would be. And it's not terribly difficult. It's just time consuming to actually like animate the Rahi and get them kind of moving around. I found a GIF that I had saved of a file I was working on the other computer with a little bat just kind of flying. It was so simple but so cute, and coming up with ways to do that in studio that were relatively replicable, so that cranking out, you know, 200 or whatever enemies, Rahi, whatever you want to call them, wouldn't be the slog it otherwise would be. Like, could you imagine trying to design 200 plus sprites for you know, any sort of entity? And that's the thing, is I do believe, I have no way to confirm this, but in Quest for the Toa, that Lego, or at least the company that was working with them, one or the other, had used a similar sort of idea where they had a 3D model and they could move aspects of it. And then they could basically take like a screenshot or whatever you want to call it, I don't know, and then animate that, right? Just put those screenshots one right next to the other as frames. Simple to do. It's much faster than trying to design sprites. And when you look closely at the sprites themselves, at the actual Rahi in the game, you can see such nuanced detail that wouldn't need to be there on a sprite sheet, but would make sense if they had been 3D models in the first place. And I really think that's where it was. There are some cases where there are Rahi using prototype pieces that don't exist, but would make sense in earlier, you know, before Bionicle's released to the public, right? Anyway, getting ahead of myself. Long story short, Bionicle, Quest for the Toa. I really think it is a game deserving of if not a remaster, a sequel, right? And although I don't necessarily believe I'm the person to do that, in part because I don't have all of the skills nor the time required to do it, and I can't really justify spending my time doing that. Unfortunately, I don't get paid doing this kind of stuff, right? It, that would be my goal, you know, living in a world knowing that there are games like that out there. And there are many fan games being developed right now. And it's honestly incredible. I encourage you to go out of your way to support so many of them, honestly. Masks of Power is one that I've been just, I'm loving what I'm seeing come out of it. And all things considered, it's just a franchise with a lot of love and a lot of life left in its flame. I don't know what else to say. Anyway, all right. So that's going to be it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe. It helps the channel out immensely. You have no idea. And of course, as always, you can check out the links for Discord, Instagram, or Patreon, all of which are down in the description below. Let me know your thoughts on Bionicle, Quest for the Toa, any other Bionicle game, or if you've played Diablo or Diablo 2 or whatever. I'm only familiar with the second one, so hopefully we can limit the scope of the conversation to that. But I really want to know if there's any sort of action role-playing game that has been a major part of your life or something that you love, then yeah, talk about it in the comments. I really want to hear your opinion. And of course, there is a gaming channel over on the Discord. You can bring that conversation over there as well. And I will see you all in the next one. Take care.